Hello, welcome to Parenting for Racial Justice. This is a recorded session focusing on elementary age children, K through sixth grade, with what we can be doing as parents and as educators to support our children in having a lens for racial justice, but also to help raise them to be anti-bias and anti-racist. So this is looking at kids in kindergarten through sixth grade. As we talked about in the previous videos and discussions, that continuing to have discussions with our kids is one of it has such great value, and that we want to be encouraging discussions, even if what your children might say might startle you or you might even completely disagree with, but at least you're then hearing their beliefs and you have a little bit more to work with than if you're not having those discussions. So discussions can happen organically. They can happen as you're watching TV together or watching, it could be more intentional when you're specifically watching a movie that you want them to see to discuss the topic, or a specific topic, I should say, or as you're reading different books together. So, again, just continuing those discussions that hopefully you've started since they were really little. If you are in a situation where that your kids are already maybe in first or second grade and you hadn't started those discussions yet, it certainly isn't too late to start. So, just as much as you can um, talk about issues of race as you see them come up in media and in your neighborhood and community. And if your child brings up things that might happen at school, it just really can help your child process and be able to learn from those discussions. In the preschool years, we did talk about the cognitive limitations. In As children get closer to ages 7 and 8, they have an increased cognitive capacity to see both similarities and differences. So, just a quick reminder that it doesn't mean we can't be having these discussions and lessons prior to this point. We just have to understand that their ability to grasp that will be limited prior to this. And during these years, K through 6, you can begin to talk even more explicitly about race, inequality, and justice. You ask your children how they feel about these issues as you discuss them, and point out negative stereotypes in books, movies, and TV shows. And of course, these were things that we recommend in the preschool years too, but just based on their cognitive development and the receptive and verbal language skills, it will naturally you'll be able to go more in depth as they get older. The other piece is when children start kindergarten, their world tends to broaden more than it did in preschool. Not for every child, but for a lot of kids, and so it does tend to be a time where they are having more exposures. They're going to potentially have more experiences with people that they perhaps haven't had experiences with prior to that, which might start some conversations. They're going to most likely have exposure to more staff members if they're at an elementary school. And again, just naturally their world is opening up and their brain is opening up even more, and they're able to take in even more information. Really take the time to celebrate when people demonstrate courage in speaking up. You'll be hopefully encouraging them to speak up, but then also really highlight when you see other people doing that, whether that's in the media, or just examples that you again might see within in your community or even within their friend groups. Having explicit conversations with children about race um, between ages 5 to 7 can improve racial attitudes in a short time. And I think that that's really encouraging, especially for educators when, um, I don't have a whole lot of control over what the experiences, well, I don't have any control over the experiences that my students have prior to my time with them. And so if I was a teacher in K through 2 and um, have this knowledge that it wouldn't take too long for children's racial attitudes to shift. That's really hopeful. Thinking about even having kids for a short amount of time. Another thing, especially if your comfort level isn't super high, which I can appreciate. We all are on this journey and we're at different places in this journey. Something that you could do is start with what's familiar. So gender is a concept that is very familiar to children. They know, these are boys, these are girls. And so having conversations about you could even talk about what are similarities between boys and girls, and oh, well, what happens when those seem different. When you think a girl is like this, but then really she's not, or what happens when a girl is starting to present more as a boy, and or even wants to be called a boy. And so sometimes, although that may still seem confusing, it might be more tangible for some children than the idea of race. Again, just trying to come up with some things of what how to start conversations if you're not as familiar with that. Hopefully, through this course, you have become more comfortable, and that these kind of smaller ways in aren't as needed, but I want to make sure I at least share them here. We've talked a lot about using children's literature throughout this course. I continue to recommend that for all ages. Use news media, what's happening around us, and explore solutions together. So instead of saying to your child, well, this is how it really should be, say, well, what do you think could be done to make this better? And I think that we don't always give young kids enough credit, that they often have really awesome ideas and they feel so respected and empowered when they are able to share those ideas. And again, continuing to ask questions to understand the child's perspective and listen to their answers without judgment. Again, even if what they say might surprise you or not feel in line with your beliefs. Also, K through 6, children are more ready to talk about history. I know the video I shared here in Schoology of Beverly Daniel Tatum talking to her young son about slavery, that discussion really worked for her. And she did a wonderful job being able to talk to him in a developmentally appropriate way. Not all of us are going to have those skills, right? If you aren't as familiar with young kids, those discussions can be a little bit harder to navigate when they're younger. And so just know that it's okay if you haven't touched on that with your kids under age 5. In some ways, many of them may not have been ready for that, but certainly in these elementary years, they are more ready to be able to conceptualize some of that. And it can be really hard to have those conversations, but to be able to name that to them, to say, this is really hard to talk about. This makes me really sad. And we're happy that this doesn't happen to the extent that it used to happen, but that it is still happening, and then giving examples of how that might look. It is recommended that you call racism by its name. And again, I know that we all kind of have different levels of comfort with that. And so if you aren't comfortable with that yet, sit with that for a while and think about why that is. And hopefully as time goes on and you continue to move forward in your journey, you'll feel more comfortable with that. Discuss what Black Lives Matter means. I think that there can be some confusion about what that is. We've all seen the signs or people saying that, well, all lives matter. Of course they do. This is never, Black Lives Matter was never meant to insinuate that all lives don't matter. But we have to think about, I'm sure many of you have heard the example of if there is a house on fire and the fire department comes to put out the house, to put out the fire, they're not going to spray water on all of the houses. They're going to spray water on the house that is on fire at that time. And that is what Black Lives Matter is trying to um, bring light to, I guess, for lack of a better term, of this is something that we need to address right now, and it cannot wait any longer. So being able to articulate that to our kids. Another example I've heard is comparing it to the rainforest. When Save the Rainforest, we're not saying all other forests don't matter. That is not the intent at all. But we do know that for a long time, rainforests were really endangered and they needed some attending to. Read books about historical content. We are so lucky that there are so many books that, children's books, that really lay things out. So even if you're not certain of a topic, a children's book can be a great way for you and your child to learn together. It's okay if you don't know all of the information that you're wanting your children to know. That is okay to learn alongside of them. Discuss heroes, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., President Barack Obama, so your children can know that heroes come in all different skin colors, and hopefully we're getting to a point where those heroes are being highlighted more in our education system. But we do know that that hasn't always been the case. Make verbal observations with your child. If you're watching a show and you notice that the characters are all white, point that out to your child. I really like this show, but I noticed that all the characters are white. What do you think about that? We want this generation to grow up being mindful of this. And so when they are out in the world, they are mindful of how things can come across, of how things look, and we want to be helping our children see that. If we don't mention or point out these types of things, they they may grow up being ignorant to that. And although there is some blissfulness to being ignorant, it's not really helpful to those around us and to our community and to our world. Um, we saw the example of the boy in the blob. So I wonder why the creators of this game made all the enemies people of color, or all of the enemies the color black. I put a picture here of some fairies together because I had a little friend of mine over this fall, and she is a child of color, and she was helping me move my fairy garden from outdoors to indoors. And as I was kind of gathering the fairies with her, I told her that I was really frustrated that I haven't been able to find any fairies for my garden that have brown or black skin. And I told her, I said, I wonder why that is, and it's really frustrating to me. And she said, well, most people are white, so I get it. I get why you can't find them. She's 6, by the way, just to turn 6. And it broke my heart. And I said, although many of the people you see are white, there are many, many, many more people out there in the world that do have brown and black skin, and the companies that make the fairies should be showing that. And so this was what that discussion told me, was that she unfortunately isn't having a lot of exposure to other people of color. She is currently being raised by her mom, who is white, and 2 of her siblings that are white. Her dad, who is black, recently passed away, and she didn't have much of a relationship with his family, and so her time with him was cut short pretty quickly, and kind of her ties to that part of her life was cut off pretty quickly. And so that's a discussion her mom and I had about how can um, is there any way I can support her with more exposure so she doesn't feel like she's not like most people. And at any rate, so that was one thing it told me. It also I I was wanting to get across to her that it's okay to not be okay with the fact that they aren't all white. Like, she doesn't have to just be okay with that. And that it is, and I want her to know that I care enough that I am going to continue to look for fairies that have brown or black skin. And if I continue to not find them, then I will be reaching out to the companies that make fairies to talk to them and see um, what they can do about that. And so I think those are important conversations. And I think that was perhaps a different conversation, or maybe had, it, I felt like for her to hear that from me as a white woman, um, hopefully she was able to see that here I am as an ally to her. I wasn't looking at it as, oh, I'm going to make this better for her, but rather looking at this, no, this is just really wrong. And this needs to be better for everybody, not just for the children that have brown and black skin, but for also the children that have white skin, to be able to see that they aren't necessarily the majority. Um, Anyways, just very interesting. But again, to be able to make these verbal observations and have a discussion around